Not only are we not asking the right questions, but we're also trying to solve the wrong problem.
Welcome to Aha Moments with me, Kobi Omenaka. My guest this week is Sarah Parsonage from One Question.
We've kind of got caught up in this desire for knee-jerk reactions, knee-jerk solutions.
Sarah Parsonage founded One Question to challenge the way that we think and to push business leaders to think about how they could uncover real and lasting change.
We are on a search for answers the whole time. We've built an economy based around answers. There is industries based around problem solving. It's who we are.
And this is whether it's the future of work, the climate crisis, social impact. One Question sparks the conversations that matter. Tune into this episode where I ask Sarah my 3 questions, the aha moment questions, and see what she has to say. Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Aha Moments podcast with me, Kobi Omenaka, and today I'm joined by the fantastic Sarah Parsonage. Sarah, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Not a problem at all. And we're going to get into One Question. And do you call it is it a summit? Is it a conversation, isn't it? That's the term you use for One Question. And we're going to get into that shortly. But I came to maybe the first One Question, invited by Jeremy Connell-Waite in the before times, pre-pandemic times, and I had a fantastic day, and I've been kept a track of what you're doing since then. I think it's a fantastic thing you're doing.
Thank
I want
you.
everyone who's listening to understand a bit more about the conversation and the day and everything that leads up to it and after it. But I'd like to know a bit more about your background and just let people have a sneak peek, have an insight into what brought you to where you are now, basically.
Yeah, of course. My background, I suppose, so I grew up in Surrey and we moved around a lot as a family, which I think comes obviously with its challenges, but I think it also makes you quite resilient. I ended up after school, I was never particularly interested in school. I wasn't bad at school per se. I just wasn't, it didn't massively interest me. And I think, you know, in hindsight, looking back now, I was so curious. And school isn't really, especially, you know, all those many moons ago when I was at school, it wasn't really about curiosity. It was very much kind of more rote learning, which I didn't really do very well at. Sort of being told what to learn, how to learn it wasn't really my thing. Being able to explore something and see something differently and ask questions is very much my thing, obviously. So it wasn't really until I got to university and studied sociology that I sort of really lent into that. But also, I had quite a lot of fun at university as well. So I sort of balanced.
Isn't that what university's for, though? That's the main reason, isn't it? There's not.
Yeah, I think in hindsight, I would have done things. I mean, it's easy to say, isn't it? Slightly differently.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did sociology, and that I absolutely fell in love with, combined with English literature, which my sort of 2 favourite things really is people and words. So yeah, and then I ended up in Bristol for sort of the majority of my 20s and 30s, really. And then moved back to London really for work in 2014. So it's quite a while now since I've moved back to Southwest London, and then not long after set up One Question. So yeah, I think moving around but staying within the UK has been quite a theme of my background.
You said, can you explain to me why you were traveling around a lot when you were a kid? Because I had the same experience, so it'd be interesting to dig into that. Because I have a few theories about how that's affected my life and things like that. But what was the reason for you moving around?
Yeah, I think so. We sort of moved to lots of different spaces. My parents separated when I was quite young,
right? And
I think because of that, naturally, I think you end up, well, for certainly for us, you just end up moving to different spaces to try different things, and I think I think you then very much build if you're lucky, a sort of 2-house family. And so you get very used to very quickly being in different spaces that are your own. Now that has quite an interesting impact, I think, on your security and stability. And I'm incredibly close to my family. So my dad and I talk a lot now about the fact that it probably is what's led to me being quite a big risk taker, because you get used to adapting so much.
Absolutely, yeah. And
it makes you really resilient. But I think also, as I say, it kind of takes the norm of that sort of security and stability that you crave from quite a young age away. So like anything, there's good things and bad things. And so we moved up north for a bit. We moved around for a bit, and then I came back to Southwest, and I was back at university. So I kind of did a bit of a etch-a-sketch.
A dance around, yeah.
If you like, yeah.
Because I was born in Nigeria and came to England when I think I was 2, maybe not quite turned 2. And my dad was a doctor at that time, and because we had no family ties, and doctors, I think is very much still the case, you're on rotation, so you can move around quite quickly. I think when if you have got family ties, then you try and stay in your kind of local area as much as possible. For example, I know a doctor, like a doctor with a young family. She lives in Manchester near me, but she goes to the hospital in Liverpool, where she was 20 minutes down the road like 6 months ago. So that just meant that I think as a family we were quite happy to go from. We started off in Crewe, then went to Northampton. We were in Liverpool for a bit, and then settled in Manchester. And I think that's really helped me. That's kind of shaped my way of. In that, I think I've from putting a bunch in a group with a whole bunch of new people, then I'm very easily just gelling with people and getting on with people, and I'm very easy to assimilate and connect. Whereas I know people who've had that kind of, they just had one life all the way through till now, and some people find it hard to connect with new people when they're in new situations. And I travel all around the world after university, and the guy I was traveling with, I know I could see that he found it a bit harder to like gel with new people in new situations, new languages, new cultures, things like that. Whereas I was happy as a pig in shit, really. This was just like exactly what I loved, and I think that's definitely affected and impacted my life going forward in a positive way, I feel.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think, ironically, the consistency of community and the relationships that we need to thrive is fundamental, especially right now, probably more so than ever before. And I do think we've lost a bit of that. So I think there's a huge benefit to people who have grown up in an environment where they've been able to build that community and invest in it and sustain it. But equally, I think, to your point, by moving around a lot and being in different spaces and going to different schools, it forces you to create new relationships and do so quite quickly, and create relationships with people who might not think or look like you. And I think, again, that's equally an underrated skill, especially right now. So I think there's there's benefits to both things. Certainly, it's very easy to say, isn't it? Because I'm a big believer in that. I think all of your experiences end up getting you to where you are and what you're supposed to be doing.
100%, yeah.
My background and all of the sort of brilliance and the complications that came with it enabled me really to set up One Question. So
what spurned, what was the driver for One Question? I'm sure you've had this question many times.
No,
it's such a fascinating concept to me. And well, can you first of all explain what One Question is to people who are listening?
Absolutely, yeah. So we're an advisory organisation, really, that looks to explore some of our biggest challenges through the lens of a single question. And we do that through very carefully curated conversation that invites different perspectives from different organisations, different communities across society, whether it might be the CEO of the FT through to the co-founder of Hawksmoor, through to a climate activist. Very different perspectives to better understand shared challenges and therefore come up with new answers and new opportunities.
And it kind of manifests most obviously around this one day.
Well, it used to. So certainly when you came, and forgive me, I didn't realise in all of our conversations that you'd been back in the heyday, in the early days. But so certainly originally it stemmed around what would be considered now our annual conversation, which was really about exploring that single question through different perspectives in one day. Now we do that every day. So we have so many different conversations. Our business really is one question, one conversation, many answers. And so those conversations really manifest themselves in sort of more intimate discussions to join the dots between business, politics and community and see what change that we can shift, whether that is informing policy, whether that is behaviour change, whether that's some of the challenges that we're all facing in organisations right now, from the climate crisis through to trust in business, through to economic uncertainty. So we do some of those. We create conversations for organisations. We have our podcast series.
Yep.
We have a form of, if you will, consultancy where we work very closely with different businesses to solve their problems, but in a very different type of consultancy. An example of that is the project that we've just launched in Bristol, exploring how we address the rise in poor mental health, and by better understanding what keeps us happy, whether we can join the dots between business, community, institutions to shift policy and invest in preventing poor mental health and therefore mental illness. And that's been 3 years in the works that stemmed from an initial challenge with the NHS, who's part of our community. And we launched that with the one question: who is responsible for our mental health? So it manifests itself in so many different ways. We're just about to launch One Question Live, which will be a sort of more open conversation, if you will, that's open to everybody. All of our conversations really are invite only and under Chatham House, because the fundamental impact, if you will, or the point, I suppose, is to find many answers that obviously then deliver outcomes, deliver change, deliver commercial opportunity, whatever the sort of metric might be.
So if they are under Chatham House rules, how does that help, or how does that help drive action if it's kind of closed house?
They're all under Chatham House rule, but we then produce critical thinking to support all of them. And that critical thinking has approvals associated with it. So obviously for those that don't know, I'm sure most people do, but Chatham House is really about being able to publish anything that's said. You're just not able to attribute it to any particular person. So anybody can have access to the outcome of the conversation, the reflection, the critical thinking. They just might not know who said what in the room, and we tend not to publish anything that is under Chatham House, of course, and we definitely don't obviously attribute it. And I think the impact really determines what kind of impact that you're wanting to make. Change often starts small, and it can be within an organisation, it can be within a community. So the conversation that we did in Bristol was under Chatham House rule. The critical thinking and the report that we have since published, which has been really well received and certainly is making waves, will change the impact will change things by being able to reduce the impact that poor mental health has on the NHS. So our sole objective really there is to reduce waiting lists by looking at who else is responsible for poor mental health, seeing if we can invest in models of prevention, whether it's in business, whether it's in education, whether it's in community, however that might be. So I don't think that there is a necessarily challenge with having Chatham House. I think a lot of people think that there is, but there isn't. What it does is enable you to create a very honest and open conversation that actually, ironically, creates more outcomes, because you're not inviting people in to say things they feel very comfortable saying, which arguably doesn't change anything.
I mean, I'm 100% behind any drive to positively impact what we can do with the NHS. It's one of my greatest fears and concerns at the moment, certainly in the UK. And in parallel to that, my brother lives in the States, and I'm just like, fret every single day that they, as the world's biggest economy, people don't just have basic right or access to any kind of healthcare, and that to me is horrific. So the NHS, for me, I know supporting that is fantastic. On top of that, more and more people being aware of how mental health affects your life and can manifest in different ways and can form in different areas is something that I think is incredibly powerful. So to hear the kind of things your one question is tackling and driving policy there, that's insanely commendable, right? That's fantastic.
Well, I mean, we haven't done it yet. So how one question manifests itself in. So, the core of the business and the vision of the business is by leaning into curiosity and by inviting people to lean into curiosity to better understand some of the challenges that we're facing and how we can answer them in conversation from very different perspectives. Now, the project that we've piloted in Bristol, because it's a place-based approach, so we believe that for so long, trying to address poor mental health, which is very different from mental illness, has been a one-size-fits-all. And so what we're attempting, and attempting is a very important word right here, is to see whether actually we can create something that is very specific to a particular region, that then becomes a blueprint for the country, because it's very much linked to community, and every community is different, and Bristol has a phenomenally diverse community. And therefore we have to understand what causes poor mental health and how that differs based on your socioeconomic background, your culture, et cetera, et cetera. So, but that is, we could, spend the next the duration of this podcast talking about that one project, and we are obviously that is one of many. So, but I think the point really is that as a business, that's how we manifest ourselves: one question, one conversation, many answers.
Have you seen the TV show True Detective?
I have. I haven't really. I didn't get into it, not in the same way that I did many others.
Sure.
But yes, I have.
Well, in fact, just as an aside, we reconnected recently because, well, I've started posting on LinkedIn regularly, like recommending TV shows and films I'm watching, things like that. And you were saying, "What's Shrinking? What's Shrinking?" I was like, "Oh, yeah, it's on the list," but blah, blah. And then I got around to watching over Christmas. I was actually blown away. You know, it's emotional so in places, hit hard, laughed my ass off. Mm-hmm. And I think it's genuinely it's an astonishing TV show, and I think we're lucky to be in a time where shows like that can happen.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because you're absolutely right. I was a huge advocate for it, and I am because I like the story. That's very much the sort of thing that attracts me, and it always interests me that there's a big push around having to capture your audience. The first line of a book, whatever it is, you've got to capture the audience. And I think interestingly with Shrinking, and Succession actually was the same. I don't know if you've ever watched that.
I've watched Succession, yeah, of course. Sorry,
you never know these days. And actually I watched the first episode or half of the first episode like you did with Shrinking, decided it wasn't for me, and White Lotus is another one, didn't come back to it. And then it was only because my chairman, actually, James, was like, SP, you have to watch this, that I went back to it. And I've now done the same. So I've said, look, just watch the first episode, get past the first episode, and you will fall in love with it. But what's really interesting is when we launched our project in Bristol, it's a little anecdote for you. I was already thinking about what our next question might be as part of this project. The pilot is 3 years. So we've asked who is responsible for our mental health. What will our next project be? And I have a real passion for street art. And obviously, like growing up in Bristol, street art is a huge part of sort of Bristol culture. And I met with Mr. Penfold, Tim, who's a phenomenal street artist, abstract street artist. And actually, as many will know, we produced our own piece of street art on the side of Triodos Bank with Jodie, another phenomenal artist, which if you're in Bristol, do go and have a look at because it is beautiful. And I met with Penfold to talk about our next question, which we believe will be, what keeps us happy? I'm looking up because I've got a piece of it up here. And we answered the question of someone to lean on. The one thing that keeps us happy is someone to lean on. We called it our community, our scaffolding, etc. etc. Now, what we're going to work on is what that means. How do you do that? How do you ask for help? How do you lean on somebody? And obviously, as you will know, and I don't want to give it away, there's a final part of Shrinking that brings the entire series right back to this point of the importance of leaning on people.
Yes.
And as you can imagine, that for me was the universe really playing games with us. It's actually my next newsletter that I'm writing.
Thanks again for pushing on. And I'm an advocate of the. So it annoys me in the way that I didn't do it myself. But I am an advocate of watch the whole episode, maybe push on a bit more, and sometimes. There is, like I said, that one line, the first line in a song, the first line is supposed to hook you, but if it doesn't, if you can sense something's there, then do try and persevere. And with Shrinking, sorry guys to belabor this, but Jason Segel, love him. Bill Lawrence is the creator, love him, love his stuff he's done before. Harrison Ford, of course, Jessica Williams. These are all people who I've known, loved and trusted for the past few years. Yeah, it didn't kind of pull me in straight away. And that was just on my own. So it takes someone to say, it takes, to be receptive to like someone who I haven't seen for 8 years. Yes, watch Shrinking, Kobi, try it again. But the reason I was asking about True Detective, because in the most recent series, which was led by Jodie Foster, she plays a police chief in Alaska, following a series of deaths which they're trying to solve. One of the things she kept repeating in the episodes, which I loved, was, they'd be asking questions about what's happening in the situation. And one thing she did reiterate is, that's the wrong question. What's the right question? And people suggest other things, and she'd be saying, no, that's not the right question, until that right question was asked, and then things would kind of galvanize. And that made me think a lot about what you guys are doing at one question. And this is just a long-winded way of saying, how do you work on that one question? How do you decide that one question? I'm sure you've been asked this many times before, but maybe not in that same way.
Clearly what I have learned today is that I need to go back and watch True Detective.
Yeah. Well, Night Country you can watch definitely by itself. That's the most recent season.
Okay, thank you. So I think how we come up, well, obviously now we have a methodology, but I think the difference with ours, maybe not, I don't know. The difference for me, should I say, is that it has been really developed over the last 7 years of asking questions and finding new answers. And so the methodology is constantly iterated and evolved based on the conversations that I largely am having, we are having generally. And I think it's quite meta because the methodology is an outcome of the business. So if, for example, we are working with somebody to explore a question around the climate crisis, then whatever their challenges might be specific to that particular institution, organization, or community, the question will be determined by the last 7 years of questions and conversations that we've been having. It's never in isolation, because 4.5 years ago, I probably had a conversation with somebody. One question invited somebody into a conversation that had a perspective on that particular topic, and that will influence what we do next. So as a business, we have what I believe to be a very cool methodology that really supports the framework, if you will, of how we even try and come up with our questions. And ultimately, they are distilled from challenges. Being completely honest with you, it is innate to me. So it is reverse engineered. My somewhat, I'm sure for people that love me, annoying curiosity over the last few years really is what created one question and what manifests still today. In that I am naturally curious about some of the challenges that we have, to the point that I ask so many questions, because questions are layered. And I talk about it in a sort of diamond shape, that you look at the challenges, you put them into the diamond, you take them out of the initial place, so the institution or the business or the community, wherever it really originates from, you bring it back in. So I think really I'd love there to be a really articulate, simple answer. And we apply the methodology, but it is arguably about really, really understanding the challenges from different perspectives, taking them into that diamond, looking at it from how it might impact the customers, the clients, the business, wider society, community, and then taking it back into the organization. And that's really what determines the one question. Now, it's not a particularly long process. It can happen quite quickly. It depends. And you know, I've said many, many times when I've been asked this, that quite often the question that I want to ask will come. One of the most classic examples was when I was chopping carrots with my mum. She came to stay and we were making supper, and I had been turning this question around, or this challenge around, and I'd got probably at this point 17 questions, maybe 20, something like that. And then it sort of came to me when I was
chopping carrots.
Yeah, it does purpose really drive profit. And I think also, and I've said this again a few times, one question begets the next, certainly from an annual perspective, because we have two sides to the business. So we have our one question, in which we will really identify the zeitgeist, what's happening in the world, and what are the biggest challenges that we're all facing, and how do they manifest differently? And then we invite different people to lean in and lead those conversations and explore those questions with us to find answers. And then we have the questions that people bring to us, or the challenges that people bring to us in order for us to work on a question with them. And that's very bespoke to them. So the great two examples is this year we're asking, how do we lead at times of uncertainty? I did not know quite how important and relevant that question was going to be when we asked it at the end of 2023. And that's something that we've been spending an awful lot of time on, working with in different ways on, and it culminates at our annual conversation this year. The project that I talked about in Bristol around mental health was a challenge that the ICB in Bristol were facing. And they came to me with their challenges, and that's how we turned it into who is responsible for our mental health. So it's to kind of, that's a lot of waffle for you, but essentially...
No, it's great to get the insight there, definitely. Carrots,
excuse me.
Carrots through to collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. Methodology, carrots, and one question begets the next.
Well, this podcast is called Aha Moments, which I like to ask one question maybe spliced 3 ways. And the first version of that is, Can you think of an aha moment in a product or service that you've worked on yourself? And how did you get people? How did you find out, first of all, that people are interested in it, and how then did you kind of pull people into your orbit? So, if you want to talk, well, I'm not going to lead you. I'm going to see where this goes.
So, as we have talked about, I don't know that I have aha moments per se.
Sure.
Not that I want to kind of change the nature of this conversation at all. I really don't. But for me, it's more, it's one of those. It's like,
sure.
It's not, and don't get me wrong, when I fixed my coffee machine this week myself without any help, I got it. And it was an aha, got it. And it was brilliant. And I was very happy about that. But I think for me as a human, and certainly for One Question, it is very much about the gradual reflection that then brings about those moments or aha moments, if you will. And that's really what I lend to. So it's quite, as we've talked about before, it's quite difficult for me to think of a particular product that has given me that, because I actually think it's us. It's kind of the ability to be able to walk away from whatever the problem is, which again, it might not align to the question, sorry. Because so much of what I'm trying to solve through One Question is not actually about any product or technology, or if I've understood the question correctly, it's about the ability to be able to step out of your everyday and not actually rush to an aha moment. And that's when the aha moment comes. Does that make sense?
Not trying to force it. But,
yeah.
I mean, what kind of feedback do you get from people when they've been involved with working with you or in the conversation day specifically, that you've taken as like, okay, we need to do more of this? I like the, not just positive feedback, I guess, but things that maybe go, oh.
I mean, we have a lot of it, which is wonderful, and it varies. It really does. So I've had guests email me that they woke up at the middle of the night after a conversation and had an answer to something that they'd been struggling with for the last 6 months. Wow. I've had people come to me and say that was one of the best conversations because I'm fundamentally thinking differently about our business. We had quite a well-known publisher change their business model based on a conversation that we had at One Question in 2019. So it ranges. I think the most common theme with all of that, and it comes back to sort of where you could either go to Freud and look at kind of the unconscious processing if you wanted to do that. And he talked about this a lot, and he's got so many theories around the idea that actually when you step away from the problem, you allow your brain to process it in a way that then solves the problem. I think it was Graham Wallace had a similar theory, and he called it illumination as part of his creative process in the 1920s. So there's lots and lots of people far smarter than me that have talked about this theory. And so the single common theme with anybody that comes to One Question is that generally the aha moment will come hours, days, weeks, months later.
And that's fair. And I think that, I experienced this. If I feel like I need to pull an all-nighter to get some work done and things just aren't working, but I still try and persevere, and then I eventually go to bed and then wake up in the morning and it's like, oh well, yeah, I know exactly what I need to do now. And had I gone to bed like 6 hours later, I would have been more refreshed and less angry with myself. So I've witnessed that myself many times, and I can understand it, and I can see why that helps. But what's great is that, go on.
No, sorry to interrupt you. I think it's really important because I think more so ever before, when the world is so fragmented right now, we are on a search for answers the whole time. We've built an economy based around answers. There is industries based around problem solving. It's who we are. And I am as guilty of that as anybody else. But I think now what we're trying to do is rush to answers. We see it as, and that can be because there's economic gain, or it can be because there's an overwhelming drive to solve a problem, both of which are completely fair and understandable. But I think to your Jodie Foster's point, quite often, not only are we not asking the right questions, but we're also trying to solve the wrong problem.
Yes, yeah.
And I think that constant desire to find answers, and I'm not saying for 1 minute that answers aren't fundamental, they are. Answers, outcomes, action is really important. And I will die on the hill that one question will never have a conversation for the sake of having conversation. But by the same notion, I think we've kind of got caught up in this desire for knee-jerk reactions, knee-jerk solutions. And so the aha moment, ironically, actually can't be forced. It doesn't come instantly, and it very rarely comes when we want it to.
That's it.
Right? So I think we have to give ourselves a bit more space and build and develop economic models that allow us to do that, because ultimately they pay off, because we find not only one answer, many answers to be tested, and far more opportunity, commercial, creative, systemic change, policy shift, behavior change, however you are measuring your success. And that's what we do.
And I feel that resonates in so many different areas of life and life in general. I was thinking about how I was listening to a few comedians talking about they can't put on a show this year because they need to go away and experience life a bit more before they can build things into their act. And authors, script writers saying that there's some that write for just literally 2 hours in the day, and then they go away and live their life, and then that feeds into the work that they do. Same thing with like coders and software engineers. Often they'll be working hard on a problem and it doesn't work. They can't get their head through it. Come back the next day and it just flows like butter. And to be able to give yourself that time to accept that that's how things work, and your body needs to absorb, not digest. I'm trying to think of a process. There you go. Process what's going on in your brain and your head and your whole body together. Allowing that to happen, I think, is probably one of the biggest things. Recognizing that's a really important part of the process is a really important thing that a lot of people don't let themselves do. Don't give themselves the time to do that.
Well, yeah, and I think increasingly right now, especially, we're constantly time short, time poor. Yeah. We don't have enough time. We're trying to juggle the sort of chaos and the emotional weight of a world that is so uncertain, politically, economically, that is changing in ways that for many of us makes us very uncomfortable, and trying to navigate developing a career, holding on to a job, raising a family, sustaining a relationship, insert any one of those responsibilities. And so creating time to solve problems feels quite often for most of us a luxury.
Yeah.
And yet, as we know, all businesses, all communities, all institutions are made up of humans. And it is the ability to process creatively, the ability to process full stop, depends on our ability to be able to walk away from any challenge or problem and to think about it in a very different way. And our brain needs that. Yeah. So that's a tension the whole time, right? It's the tension between having 6 hours to deliver on a pitch whilst also needing that time to come up with the answer, the opportunity, the solution, however you frame it. And so I've had and continue to have endless aha moments, but I can have an aha. I'm working on quite a few at the moment, and I am, as anyone will tell you, and it was my nickname for a little while, I am inherently impatient. And so it's ironic that I build a business which is very much about not taking days and weeks to find answers, because businesses don't have that luxury necessarily, but creating environments in which we allow people the space to do that. Yeah. Whilst at the same time having to educate myself that I can't force this.
Yes.
And I'm navigating that wonderful tension daily.
So the second aha question is, and again, feel free to take this in any direction you want. Have you had can you think of an aha moment in a product or service that you buy or use regularly? And what was that like?
So, excuse me, I think I get most of mine from reading.
Sure.
So I'm going to probably say to that one, Vanity Fair. But
really?
I think you can insert any of the publications, books, things that I read, podcasts, because I have a dog. So podcasts make up a huge amount of my dog walking time. And quite often I find a lot of my aha moments in there, because that's where I join the dots. And Vanity Fair has this very strange reputation of being a sort of bedfellow to Vogue, and very much focused around celebrity and fashion and gossip. But it's far from that. It's one of the best forms of critical thinking, I think, out there. And it's the only thing other than the FT that I get in print now. And it certainly stems a lot of the ideas. It stems a lot of our themes and a lot of the questions that we ask, because it certainly joined the dots for me.
No, I absolutely love that. And I echo like the learning from multiple different sources. I don't read as much, even audiobook form, but I do remember when I started voraciously both listening to audiobooks a lot when I had to go running or walking. My commute was quite a bit longer, and listening to podcasts. And the amount of times I'd just be full to the brim of like, okay, I need to try this. Let's try this. I didn't think about something that way before, and it just was like an explosion. And this has definitely driven me to making podcasts and helping other people make podcasts and trying to, drive conversations in this way, because I know it can inspire other people.
Absolutely.
Even if it just inspires one of my podcasts that talks about films on Netflix, even if it just inspires someone to watch the film on Netflix that we're talking about, and that's a great thing from my point of view.
Yeah, tilt the head. If you tilt the head as one person, then. And
last aha moment is, I might like to phrase it as a life hack. Can you think of any aha moments or a life hack that you use personally that's like that you like to talk about or share with people?
Oh, I think that like this, basically we're just highlighting that I am the most impractical person on the planet, aren't we? Because I'm sure I should be saying any sort of AI. I mean, I will admit that I think Claude as an AI language at the moment is phenomenal. Have you tried
DeepSeek yet?
Not yet, no. We've got our AI podcast episode coming up, actually, which I'm quite excited about. And that, again, is very timely. But so I do think that from a sort of practical tech perspective, then I would definitely say I've been doing a lot of research into it, because I think we have to embrace it, because for me, it is the perfect bedfellow to humanity, but it won't replace it, in my opinion. Now, I have a romantic, idealistic sort of view of the world, and I think the importance of being able to use tools like this as co-pilots is on all of us. So I think that's probably my greatest sort of, not life hack, but certainly business hack, hack, if you will.
Sure.
But I do think that the life hack is being able to step away, and maybe that sounds kind of somewhat trite, but actually constantly forcing yourself when something, especially right now, right? We are all carrying so much uncertainty, so much what feels like for many of us devastation across the world. And yet we are also navigating the trials and tribulations of just, building businesses or sustaining careers. And I think the ability to walk away and sit with something and come back to it, whether it's an hour or whether it's, a day, is probably at the moment the most important life hack that we can all just try and use a little bit more.
So I think that's a perfect answer. And you started by saying I'm not the right person, but I think that's genuinely it is exactly right. In my former career, I used to, I was an engineer, and that I'm only saying that in relevance because that's the kind of place where you work 40 hours a week, no more, no less. If you did have to work on a project, they would pay you overtime. So what that meant was I could quite easily carve out an hour and a half at lunchtime, and I would always go for a run at lunch. And when I came back from that run at lunchtime, or even a swim, I'd feel like a whole new person. The afternoon would be amazing. The start of the morning would be great, and then it kind of teeters away, and then the afternoon would be a fantastic one because I've just gone away from the screen, I've gone away from the environment, and then come back to it, and I feel like a whole new person and smash through a load of work. And that's something I don't do now, and I kind of rue that. Something I need to create for myself and allow myself to do. But so what you're saying there, even if it's just an hour, I think that's so important for a lot of different reasons. So thank you for that, even though you said you thought it was the wrong answer.
It's not. I mean, look, I don't believe there's ever any wrong answer. I just don't know if it was a relevant one per se for this particular theme of the podcast. But I think, and look, we all know it's very easy to say and it's much harder to do. If you're up against it, and as someone who's going through an investment round right now, you are meeting an investor in a few hours and you have not cracked a particular part of whatever new version of your deck or specific requirement they might have. Sometimes the worst thing someone can say to you is walk away.
Yeah.
But I am yet to have found that it doesn't work. I've yet to find anyone who will tell me it doesn't work.
Sarah, where can people find you? Are you happy for them to connect with you on LinkedIn? And
of course, LinkedIn. We have One Question is on Instagram, one question. Our website, onequestion.live. Our podcast is also One Question on Spotify, iTunes, wherever people listen to podcasts nowadays. So yeah, many different spaces and places.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much. Nice to chat again. enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you very much to you guys listening and watching this episode of Aha Moments podcast. If you want to get in contact with Sarah, the details and the links are in the show notes or in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube. Her website is onequestion.live, so please do head over there and tell her you heard her on this podcast if you want to connect with her. Please do all the things that podcasters like myself love you to do. Like, share, subscribe, comment, review, comment especially if you're watching on YouTube. Most of all, share with your friends. Tell people that you enjoyed this episode. Tell people that they should come and listen. It really helps. One person. You heard Sarah talking about one question. I'm asking you to consider one person. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next episode.